What happens when Hollywood legend Sylvester Stallone sits down for what should be a routine interview on The View, only to find himself facing off against Joy Behar in one of the most explosive television moments ever captured? Today, we're diving into the shocking confrontation that had audiences gasping and left one of cinema's biggest stars walking off set in disgust. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment telling us what you think about this incredible clash between two entertainment titans. The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday morning as Sylvester Stallone made his way onto the View set. His signature confident stride unmistakable even at 77 years old. The Rocky and Rambo star had agreed to appear on the show to promote his latest project, expecting the usual softball questions about his legendary career and upcoming ventures. What he didn't expect was to walk into what would become one of the most contentious interviews in daytime television history. Joy Behar sat at the panel table, her notes spread before her like ammunition waiting to be fired. The veteran co-host had clearly done her homework, but not in the way most guests would hope. As the cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats, there was an electric tension in the air that even the most seasoned crew members could feel. "Welcome back to The View," Joy began with her trademark sardonic smile. "We're here with Sylvester Stallone, the man who gave us Rocky, Rambo, and apparently a whole lot of opinions about politics lately." The audience offered polite applause, but Stallone's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He'd been in this business long enough to recognize when someone was setting a trap. "Thanks for having me, Joy," Stallone replied, his voice carrying that familiar, growly tone that had commanded attention for decades. "Always a pleasure to be here with you, ladies." But Joy wasn't interested in pleasantries. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she prepared to launch into what she clearly considered her opening salvo. "So Sylvester, you've been pretty vocal lately about your political views. Some might say you've been using your platform to spread some pretty divisive messages. How do you respond to critics who say celebrities like you should stick to entertaining instead of trying to influence political discourse?" The question hung in the air like a challenge thrown down at high noon. Stallone's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained controlled. "Well, Joy, I think that's a pretty loaded question right out of the gate. I've been an American citizen for 77 years, and last I checked, the Constitution still guarantees me the right to free speech, whether I'm an actor or a plumber." "Oh, so now you're a constitutional scholar?" Joy shot back, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's interesting because some of your recent statements seem to suggest you have a pretty loose interpretation of democratic values." The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected the interview to take, and the tension was becoming palpable. Stallone's publicist, sitting just off camera, looked like she was ready to jump in and end the segment, but the veteran actor held up a subtle hand to signal he could handle this. "Joy, I'm not sure what you're getting at here," Stallone said, his voice taking on a steel your edge. "I've spent my entire career celebrating American values through my films. Rocky is about the underdog achieving the American dream. Rambo is about honoring our veterans. If you want to twist that into something divisive, that says more about you than it does about me." Joy's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Oh, please, Sylvester. Let's not pretend your movies are some kind of profound political statement. They're action flicks with explosions and one-liners. And frankly, some of the messages in those films are pretty problematic when you really examine them." "Problematic?" Stallone's eyebrows shot up, Lady, millions of people around the world have found inspiration in those characters. Rocky taught people that with hard work and determination, you can overcome any obstacle. Rambo honored the sacrifice of our military personnel. What exactly is problematic about that? Well, for starters, Joy continued, clearly relishing the confrontation, the glorification of violence, the hyper-masculine stereotypes, the oversimplified view of complex geopolitical situations. Your characters solve everything with their fists or guns. That's not exactly the kind of nuanced thinking we need in today's world. Stallone's hands clenched slightly on the arms of his chair. You know what, Joy? I think you're deliberately misunderstanding what those films represent. Rocky doesn't glorify violence. It shows a man who refuses to give up despite overwhelming odds. Rambo doesn't celebrate war. It shows the cost of war on the human spirit. Maybe if you spent less time looking for things to be offended by and more time actually understanding the stories, you'd see that. Oh, so now I don't understand storytelling. Joy's voice rose a notch, her face flushing with indignation. I've been in this business longer than you've been making sequels, Sylvester. I think I know a thing or two about narrative structure and social messaging. Being in the business and understanding it are two different things. Stallone fired back, his famous temper beginning to show. You sit behind this desk every day taking shots at people who actually create things, who actually take risks, who actually put themselves out there. It's easy to be a critic when you've never had to face a blank page or step in front of a camera and create something from nothing. The audience was dead silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't the usual playful banter that characterized most View interviews. This was a genuine clash of personalities and worldviews, and it was escalating by the minute. Joy leaned back in her chair, a smug smile playing at her lips. That's rich coming from someone who's basically been playing the same character for 40 years. Rocky, Rambo, they're all just variations on the same theme, aren't they? The angry, violent man who solves problems with brute force. Is that really the kind of role model you want to be putting out there? Stallone's face darkened. You know what your problem is, Joy. You've never understood what it means to fight for something. You've never had to overcome real adversity. Never had to prove yourself when everyone counted you out. You sit up there in your ivory tower, protected by your privilege and your platform, and you tear down people who actually know what struggle looks like. Excuse me? Joy's voice cracked like a whip. You want to talk about privilege? You're a multi-millionaire movie star who spent decades playing tough guy fantasies for teenage boys. Don't lecture me about struggle when you haven't lived in the real world for 40 years. The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every heated exchange, every flash of anger, every moment of this unprecedented clash between two entertainment industry veterans who clearly had very different views of the world and each other's place in it. Real world. Stallone's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, the kind of tone that had made his screen villains genuinely menacing. You want to talk about the real world? I grew up in Hell's Kitchen when it was actually hell. I slept in bus stations. I lived in my car. I had $39 in my bank account when I wrote Rocky. But sure, tell me more about how I don't understand struggle. Joy waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away his words like annoying flies. Oh, here we go with the rags to riches story again. Yes, we've all heard about your difficult childhood, Sylvester, but that was 50 years ago. What have you done lately besides cashing checks and making the same movie over and over again? The other co-hosts were exchanging worried glances now, clearly uncomfortable with the direction Joy was taking this interview. Whoopi Goldberg attempted to jump in with a diplomatic comment, but Joy cut her off with a sharp look that said she wasn't finished. You know what I think? Joy continued, her voice taking on a particularly nasty edge. I think you've been coasting on that underdog story for decades, milking it for sympathy while you live in your mansion and collect your millions. The real Sylvester Stallone disappeared a long time ago, replaced by this manufactured persona of the working class hero. Stallone's eyes flashed with genuine anger. Now, lady, you don't know the first thing about me or what I've been through. You sit there in your designer clothes with your guaranteed paycheck, surrounded by people who tell you how wonderful you are, and you think you have the right to judge how I've lived my life. I have the right to judge what you put out into the world, Joy shot back, her voice rising to match his intensity. And what you've put out is a steady stream of mindless violence wrapped up in patriotic rhetoric. You've made a fortune selling young men the fantasy that they can solve their problems by punching people. That's not what those movies are about, and you know it, Stallone growled, his famous temper now fully unleashed. Rocky is about perseverance, about getting back up when life knocks you down. Rambo is about the forgotten veterans who gave everything for their country and got nothing in return. If you can't see the humanity in those stories, that's your failure, not mine. Joy leaned forward aggressively, her eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Humanity, really? Let's talk about humanity, Sylvester. Let's talk about how your movies have contributed to a culture of toxic masculinity. How they've taught generations of men that the only way to be respected is through violence and aggression. You're twisting everything I've ever done, Stallone said, his voice tight with controlled rage. You're taking decades of work, stories that have inspired millions of people, and you're reducing them to some kind of toxic propaganda. That's not criticism. That's character assassination. Oh, I'm sorry, Joy said with mock sympathy. Am I hurting your feelings? Are you going to cry about it? Maybe throw a tantrum like one of your characters would do? The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, and it hit Stallone like a physical blow. His face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. You know what, Joy? This is exactly why. People can't stand you. You're not interested in having a conversation or understanding different perspectives. You just want to tear people down to make yourself feel superior. People can't stand me. Joy's laugh was sharp and bitter. That's rich coming from someone whose last few movies went straight to streaming because nobody wanted to see them in theaters, at least. I still have a job that people actually watch. The personal attack landed exactly as Joy had intended. Stallone's jaw clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cords. You want to talk about my career? Fine. I've been making movies for 5 decades. I've created characters that have become part of American culture. I've employed thousands of people, inspired millions more. What have you done besides sit behind this desk and throw stones? I've held powerful people accountable, Joy replied with self-righteous indignation. I've asked the tough questions that others are afraid to ask. I've used my platform to expose hypocrisy and challenge dangerous ideas. That's called journalism, Sylvester. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of just spouting off on social media. Journalism. Stallone's voice was incredulous. This isn't journalism. This is an ambush. You brought me on here under false pretenses, pretending you wanted to talk about my work, and instead you're attacking everything I've ever done. That's not journalism. That's cowardice. Joy's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Cowardice. You want to talk about cowardice? How about hiding behind fictional characters instead of taking real stands on real issues? How about making movies that glorify war while you got multiple deferments to avoid actually serving in one? The studio fell dead silent. Even the crew members stopped what they were doing, sensing that Joy had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Stallone's face went white, then red, then white again. His hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles went pale. "How dare you?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of absolute fury. "How dare you question my patriotism or my respect for the military? Those deferments were for medical reasons, and even if they weren't, I've spent my entire career honoring the sacrifice of our service members." "Oh, medical reasons," Joy said with a sneer. "How convenient. Just like your tough guy act is convenient when you're making millions from it, but disappears when real courage is required. You have no idea what real courage looks like." Stallone fired back, his voice rising to match her aggression. "Real courage is putting yourself out there, creating something from nothing, taking risks that could destroy your career. Real courage is standing up for what you believe in, even when people like you try to tear you down." Joy's smile was cold and calculating. "Is that what you call it? Standing up for what you believe in? Because from where I sit, it looks more like an aging action star desperately trying to stay relevant by pandering to the worst impulses of his fan base." "And from where I sit," Stallone shot back, "it looks like a bitter, washed-up comedian who never made it as a real entertainer. So, she has to make her living destroying other people's reputations." The exchange was spiraling completely out of control now, with both participants throwing increasingly personal attacks at each other. The other co-hosts looked helpless, unsure how to intervene in what had become a full-scale war of words. The audience sat in stunned silence, watching two entertainment industry veterans tear each other apart on live television. Joy's face was flushed with anger and what looked like genuine hatred. "At least I'm not a has-been, living off past glories, making the same tired movies for an audience that's moved on without you. When was the last time you made anything that mattered, Sylvester? When was the last time you contributed something meaningful to the culture instead of just recycling the same violent fantasies?" Stallone was breathing heavily now, his legendary temper pushed to its absolute limit. "You want to know what matters? Giving people hope, showing them that no matter how hard life gets, they can keep fighting. That's what my movies do. And that's something you'll never understand, because you've never created anything that inspired anyone." "Inspired?" Joy's voice cracked with incredulous laughter. "You call mindless violence inspiring? You call hyper-masculine revenge fantasies inspiring? The only thing you've inspired is a generation of men who think they can solve their problems with their fists." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants red-faced and trembling with rage. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented meltdown that would soon become one of the most talked-about television moments in recent memory. "You know what your real problem is, Joy?" Stallone said, his voice now deadly calm in a way that was somehow more menacing than his earlier anger. "You're jealous. You're jealous that I created something lasting, something that will be remembered long after you're gone. You're jealous that people actually care about the characters I brought to life." Joy's eyes blazed with fury at the accusation. Jealous of what? Of being a washed-up musclehead who peaked in the 70s? Of being so desperate for relevance that you'll align yourself with any cause that keeps you in the headlines. Please, Sylvester, the only thing I'm jealous of is your ability to fool people into thinking you're something more than a mediocre actor with good marketing. Mediocre actor. Stallone's voice rose dangerously. I've been nominated for Academy Awards. I've created iconic characters that have influenced popular culture for decades. I've built a career that's lasted 50 years. What have you done besides sit behind this desk and tear down people who actually accomplish things? I've built a career on truthfulness, Joy shot back, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. I've spent decades calling out phonies and hypocrites. Like you, I've used my platform to expose the kind of dangerous thinking that your movies promote. Dangerous thinking. Stallone laughed bitterly. You want to talk about dangerous thinking? How about the toxic cynicism you spread every single day? How about the way you poison every conversation with your negativity and hatred? At least my movies give people something to aspire to. Joy's face twisted into a mask of contempt. Aspire to what? Violence, revenge, the idea that might makes right. Your movies are recruitment videos for toxic masculinity, and you're too arrogant or too stupid to see it. That's it, Stallone said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I'm done with this. I came here to have a professional conversation about my work, and instead you've spent the last 20 minutes attacking everything I've ever done, everything I believe in, everything I stand for. Oh, are we hitting too close to home? Joy taunted, clearly enjoying his discomfort. Are we pulling back the curtain on the great Sylvester Stallone and showing what's really underneath? A scared little boy who never grew up, who spent his whole life playing dress-up and pretending to be tough. Stallone's face went white with rage. You don't know anything about me, lady. You don't know what I've been through, what I've overcome, what I've sacrificed to get where I am. You sit there in your little bubble, protected by your network and your lawyers, and you think you can psychoanalyze me. I don't need to psychoanalyze you, Joy said with a cruel smile. It's all right there on the surface. An insecure man who's built his entire identity around playing pretend tough guys because he never learned how to be a real man. The insult hung in the air like a physical blow. Stallone's hands trembled with barely contained rage as he stared at Joy with pure hatred in his eyes. A real man? You want to talk about real men? A real man doesn't hide behind a desk throwing stones at people who are actually out there creating things, building things, inspiring people. A real man doesn't make his living tearing other people down. And a real man doesn't throw a tantrum when someone challenges his precious ego. Joy fired back, her voice rising to match his intensity. A real man can handle criticism without falling apart like a house of cards. Criticism, Stallone's voice was incredulous. This isn't criticism. This is a character assassination. You've twisted everything I've ever said, everything I've ever done into some kind of toxic propaganda. You've attacked my patriotism, my character, my intelligence, my manhood. That's not journalism, that's a hit job. Joy leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. If you can't handle the heat, Sylvester, maybe you should get out of the kitchen. This is what happens when you put yourself out there in the public eye. People are going to judge you, and sometimes that judgment isn't going to be favorable. Judge me, Stallone's voice cracked with emotion. You're not judging me, you're destroying me. You're taking a lifetime of work, a lifetime of trying to inspire people and give them hope, and you're turning it into something ugly and hateful. I'm not turning it into anything, Joy said coldly. I'm just pointing out what was always there. The violence, the simplistic worldview, the dangerous messages wrapped up in patriotic rhetoric. You created this monster, Sylvester. I'm just holding up a mirror. You know what? Stallone said, his voice suddenly quiet and controlled. I've heard enough. I've listened to you attack my work, my beliefs, my character, my integrity. I've sat here and let you tear apart everything I've spent my life building. But I'm not going to sit here and let you destroy my legacy on live television, he began. To unhook his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. This interview is over. Joy's eyes widened with surprise and then narrowed with determination. Oh, you're walking out. How very mature of you, Sylvester. When the going gets tough, the tough guy runs away. Is that the message you want to send to your fans? Stallone paused, his hand frozen on the microphone clip. You want to know what message I want to send? I want to send a message that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to walk away. I want to send the message that you don't have to sit there and take abuse from someone who's more interested in destroying you than understanding you. Abuse. Joy laughed harshly. I'm asking you legitimate questions about your work and your influence. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. Legitimate questions. Stallone's voice rose again. You called me a fraud, a has-been, a coward, and a fake. You attacked my intelligence, my integrity, and my manhood. You twisted 40 years of work into some kind of toxic propaganda. That's not legitimate questioning. That's character assassination. If the shoe fits, Joy said, with a shrug that was clearly calculated to provoke him further. Stallone stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions from rage to disgust to something that looked almost like pity. You know what, Joy? I actually feel sorry for you. You're so consumed with hatred and negativity that you can't see anything good in the world. You can't appreciate art. You can't understand inspiration. You can't recognize the difference between entertainment and reality. Save your pity for someone who needs it. Joy shot back. I see the world exactly as it is. Not through the rose-colored glasses of someone who's been living in Hollywood fantasy land for 50 years. No, Stallone said, standing up and pulling the microphone from his lapel. You see the world through the lens of your own bitterness and cynicism. You've spent so much time looking for the worst in people that you've forgotten how to see the best. He tossed the microphone onto the table with a gesture of finality. I'm done. I'm not going to sit here and be your punching bag anymore. I'm not going to let you use me as a platform for your hatred and negativity. Joy's face was flushed with triumph and anger. That's right. Run away. Show everyone what kind of man you really are. Show them that when push comes to shove, the great Sylvester Stallone is nothing but a coward who can't handle a little criticism. Stallone paused at the edge of the set, his back to the cameras. You know what, Joy? History will judge which one of us contributed something positive to the world. I'll let my work speak for itself. And with that, he walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a crew that had witnessed television history, and Joy Behar, sitting at her desk with a mixture of satisfaction and shock on her face. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds before cutting to commercial, but the damage was done. The interview that was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had turned into one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory. That was the day Sylvester Stallone stormed off The View, and it was a moment that would be talked about for years to come. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line with her aggressive questioning? Or was she just doing her job as a journalist? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts.